Hi, good evening, everyone. It's Manwara here. As promised, I am really excited for my conversation with Sonita Turner, and this will be my third session. So, for anyone who's listening, it would be great if you could put a message on the chat or like or something, so I know that you're listening. And also, if you have any comments, please feel free to make comments or questions, and I'll see if I can address it. So a bit about me, for anyone who doesn't know me or hasn't yet connected with me or is following me. I'm Manwara Ali. I actually work in a charity. I'm a charity director, but apart from that, I also am a big advocate of mentoring and coaching and advocating leadership, particularly in women. And I did a poll on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, and most people actually came back to suggest that I talk about community leadership. Now, I looked around to see who else was doing that kind of thing on LinkedIn, and you had all these amazing individuals that have masses of following. They have million followers, 1,000 followers, and I thought to myself, no one's talking about community leadership. No one's talking about fundraising the way I would like to share. So, it's one of those things where I thought, do I wait, or is this one where I could possibly start? So with very little information tool, I was very much encouraged by my connections and decided, I'm going to go live because, and I'm going to start live streaming on Sundays. So I've been doing live streaming every other Sunday to share some of the things that I think most of us would like to know about community leadership and what makes someone start initiatives. How do we make change? The pandemic's been a really, really challenging time for many of us, especially those who run small community organizations, voluntary sector organizations and charities. And it's so valuable now that we actually connect and get to understand what some of the challenges are. And actually, we're not alone. Many of us face similar challenges. And listening to other people like Mildred's LinkedIn visibility sessions that she's been running, I've been inspired to try and do something similar, because I've realized that visibility is so important to encourage, especially with myself, to lead more. So today's session, I'm going to be having a really candid conversation with Sonita Turner, who will introduce herself, but just in case she doesn't do herself justice, I'll do a little minor intro. So Sonita has many, many years of experience of working within the social community development sector. She's got a real insight into how social services operate, how young people, the need in terms of emotional well-being need in young people. She is an expert in safeguarding and has many years of youth work background. So her experience, or her as a package, comes with a lot of understanding in how the public sector operates, as well as how the charity and community voluntary sector operates. So I'm really interested to hear from Sonita. So I'm going to invite her into the studio. Just give me a moment. Anybody who's listening, please do send us your comments, any questions that you would like to ask Sonita. I've got an expert on board, and while she's here, take the opportunity to ask the right question. So I'm going to, without ado, invite Sonita in. Hi, Sonita.
Hi.
Hello. Hello.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. Can hear you.
Fantastic. Hello, and hello to everyone who's watching as well. I'm excited and sort of nervously excited.
I know this is your first experience. I had the same feeling, the nerves, but I've overcome that now, and I'm sure you'll be all right. This is just a conversation. The weirdest thing about live streaming is that you don't actually get to see who's watching you, but people,
Yeah.
might be watching you. So it's really interesting and very helpful. Hi, Stella. Good evening. I've just seen Stella's comment. And Nazira, thank you for your comments. Keep your wonderful comments coming as Sonita introduces herself. So Sonita, over to you.
Thank you. And thank you for the little mini introduction you gave me. And you're right, I probably don't give myself enough justice or enough credit, but I guess that's human vulnerability, isn't it? We often don't recognize our own strengths or qualities, and if it's something that you've been doing so naturally for so long, it just seems like, well, yeah, that's what I do. But it's only when other people comment on the outside and say, that's amazing what you do, then you sort of stop and think, oh, okay, maybe this actually is something special. I thought it's just what I do. So thank you for that. I guess I was sitting there thinking, okay, who am I? What am I? How am I going to introduce myself? And so I've come to a nice title that I feel really quite happy and proud of. And I would introduce myself, and I see myself as an emotional health activist, an advocate, a community mentor, and long-standing youth worker, very passionate about all of those things. And I would say currently I am really trying to discover my inner storyteller. And I think that's having opportunities like this is a wonderful way for me to practice that and to build on it, because I've always felt and known that I have a story in me. We all do. But it's just sort of having the courage to sort of stand up and say, this is it. This is my truth. This is my story. And then allowing others to feel less alone or less isolated in their stories. So the storyteller part, I think, starts here today.
Excellent. We all love a story. Fran is here. Fran is watching. Hi, Fran. And Umesh, thank you for your support. Hamza, thank you for your support. Yeah, I can see that they're here. Anybody else? Keep sending us the messages, because we can see the messages. But I think, Sonita, let's dive into this whole emotional well-being. In your opinion, in your view, what do you think that means? What does emotional well-being mean?
Emotional well-being is literally, believe it or not, this is how I do describe it. It's our actual whole experience as human beings. So, your emotional well-being is something that as soon as you wake up, first thing in the morning, it's there. How you start your day, how you feel when you wake up is going to have a ripple effect over the rest of your day, over your interactions and engagements with others, and then how your day comes to an end as well. Our emotional well-being is crucial to our actual functioning, how we view the world, how we perceive others' interactions with us, how we plan for the future, whether we have hope or not. I think when someone's emotional well-being is quite low, there is a sense of hopelessness. And I'm a really big advocate for hope, because particularly in the pandemic that we've just been through, if we weren't able to hold on to some hope, I don't think we would have got through every single one of those days of that whole year. But it's when your emotional health is not positive, or it's not nurtured, or it's not being fed, your sense of hopelessness becomes very, very high. And it's hard to look to the future. It's hard to believe that you are worth taking up the space that you are taking up in the world, or in your particular part of your community. It's hard to believe that you have a place in society, or that you have anything to offer. So it's, you ask the question, and actually there's so many different angles to it. But in a nutshell, I think what I'm trying to say is emotional health is everything. It's everything.
Sonita, James is listening. Hi, James. Good to have you. Storyteller, James says, yes, storyteller, advocate, and activist. Great opener. Brilliant.
Thanks, James. Hi, James.
So yeah, so going back to, like, I mean, I know you just touched on the whole pandemic thing. Why do you think it will be a really important, or what in your view is the need right now within the workplace in terms of emotional health?
Yeah, I mean, the need is massive. If you think about what we've been through over the last year, you know, with people going into redundancies, furloughs, potentially just not even being able to find a job in the first place. And it's the people, believe it or not, as well, that I really feel for, is those at the top. So the leaders, the bosses, the managers, they've had to make really tough decisions over the last year. And I feel as much for them as I do for the people on the ground level. The people on the ground level will have had to, you know, live the result of those actions, but it's the people at the top that had to make those decisions as well. And equally, they have to live with those decisions. And when you talk about emotional health, you're talking about, you know, feelings of guilt. You're talking about, you know, confusion. You're talking about weighing up the right, the wrong, the pros, the cons. I mean, that sort of stuff doesn't just happen. It doesn't just, you know, come along overnight. Nobody was prepared for the pandemic. Nobody ever expected to be in the positions they were in terms of working and employment. And even those working from home, there was initially in that beginning, the whole thing where everyone was like, yeah, you know, this is great. I'm working from home. I'm in my gym jams, you know, I'm doing my emails. But after a while, that experience, I found myself personally, but also speaking with others, that experience became actually very lonely. It became a sort of mood. It was quite oppressive. It lowered the mood because you're not engaging anymore. You're not out there. You're not active. You know, we had the screens and things like that, but the conclusion I came to was screens will never replace face-to-face human engagement. There's something really precious about that. And I've actually come to really, really appreciate being able to walk into my workplace and see my colleagues and see them smile, and, you know, be able to just hear, smell, taste everything that's going on in my environment around me has become even more precious than I really realized before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you totally. You know, I have to say that, you know, it resonates, a lot of it resonates, but this is more about wanting to understand your journey, because you're a storyteller. And actually, I have a connection, Ikram, who says, happy Sunday. I agree. I'm in the middle of discovering how to tell my story. It's a very hard process. It's definitely consistent, work in progress. So, and then I've just read somebody else's comment. I agree 100% about hope. So I'm going to just ask you to tell a little bit about your story in terms of what kind of work environments you have been, because your experience comes from the working environments you've been, where they might have been a contrast. Give us some insight.
Yes, definitely. I would actually go as far as saying probably only in maybe the last, say, maybe 6 years or so, 5-6 years, have I sort of felt able to have hope and believe that my workplace will start to grow and develop and nurture our emotional health. And it's only in the last couple of years that I've actually felt that in action. Previous to that, I would probably say most of my employment environments and management, I would say, definitely did not tune into or show sort of any value for their workers' emotional health. I just don't think that it was even potentially, I could be wrong, but I feel like it wasn't even a thing. It wasn't a discussion. And it's the one thing I've been coming back to recently and saying the one big silver lining, possibly the only thing that's come out of COVID and the pandemic as a positive, is that we're talking about mental and emotional health and well-being now in ways that we never did before. It's being recognized, it's being validated. And I think the workplace is starting to understand that in order to get the best out of your staff and volunteers, you've got to invest in their emotional well-being. In the past, I can remember going to work and just feeling physically sick. And that would start from the minute I woke up, just knowing I just felt myself swallow in my throat there with the memory, just knowing that I was going to walk into the office. I love my job. I've always done jobs I love, but that doesn't mean the environment made me feel good. Walking in and feeling quite sick because I know that it's just going to be a case of get in, get your head down and get on with your work. And if you're not able to, meet your deadlines, or you're not able to do your work efficiently, it's because you are lacking in something, or you are not adequate for the job. And so I always felt a sense of constantly, if you like, working in fear, constantly feeling like I need to prove myself. I can do this. So I took my work home constantly. I did it at all sorts of unsociable hours. I completely cut into my own personal life because work was just constantly there in the back of my mind. And I was just thinking about being, told off or being disciplined, or just having that moment where, somebody in charge says, why didn't you do it? And you're sort of standing there, and in your head and in your heart, you want to just break down and cry and say, I just couldn't, because, not because I can't do the work, but because right now, emotionally, I can't tap into this work that you've set me. But out of fear of losing your job, you would just come up with all the excuses you can think of. So fear, I remember fear being a very big factor in past employment. And I can't think of anything worse than going to work in fear, in a fearful emotion. I love that I don't have that fear anymore. I love that when I go to work, I will always do my best, but if my best isn't quite up to scratch today, there'll be a reason, and someone will ask me, are you okay? And that's more important than anything else. And it's also been a learning about how to be brave and be honest and say, I'm struggling at the moment. It's not that I don't want to do the work. It's not that I can't do the work, but I'm personally, emotionally struggling, and I'm finding it hard to connect with the work. And then to have someone even listen to that sentence, to listen to that statement and just say, okay, what can we do to help? What can we do to support you to be able to put that piece of work together? That is life-changing. That's life-changing.
Yeah, no, that's a real insight, Sonita. And I think what I'm hearing from you as well, there's a bit of the employer perhaps needing to acknowledge that, but also the employee feeling that they can confidently express their emotional health needs to the employer. So it sounds a bit the environment or the culture within the environment is a really important things. So what would you advise if you were right now, you had a whole load of CEOs and directors and trustees of charities and voluntary sector organizations? How would you advise them? What would be helpful?
Okay, so I have thought about it. I did think about it a little bit today, and I was thinking, I was sort of thinking about, the whole sort of pyramid thing, and we're familiar with that sort of thing from Maslow and stuff like that. And I really feel like it starts from the bottom. But when I say it starts from the bottom, I mean the people at the top need to come back down to the bottom. They need to come back down to the bottom and reflect on the fact that they are the roots, because they are the ones that set the tone and set the mood and the culture of what that work environment is. And when I say they need to come down to the bottom, I mean they need to actually tap into themselves first. They need to look at their own emotional health and well-being, because you can never begin to understand others' emotional health and well-being if you're not tapping into your own first. So for instance, if I'm delivering training around empathy, I would say to my trainees, well, first of all, I want you to think about a time where you didn't or did get empathy from somebody or others when you needed it in a moment. What did that feel like? Because it's important for people to first step in those shoes. It's important for those at the top to come down, remember how it feels, because they will then feel much more passionate about it, just as I do, just as we do. They're going to remember those feelings and be like, actually, I don't want my employees or my staff or my volunteers to feel like that. I want us to have this sort of environment where my staff are not too scared to come to me, or they're all just starting to build their own resentment, and it's that whole culture of them and us. So in my mind today, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking about the pyramid, and I was thinking that the people at the top actually are the roots. They need to recognize they're the roots, they're the foundation, and so they need to return and come back down and just reconnect with their own emotional health. Once they've done that, it will filter through to the rest of the organization. And that's when I said earlier, I'm just as sympathetic to all those bosses that had to make tough decisions during COVID, because I can 100% imagine that was not easy. And they would have probably had a lot of backlash as well. And so it starts from the people at the top. However, it actually starts from the bottom of the pyramid.
It's interesting you say that. Stella's just made a comment based on what you said. Fear can be crippling when working with an emotionally incompetent manager.
100%.
And I can understand why Stella, based on Stella's, she's a connection I follow a lot, her posts, and, inspired by some of the stuff she does. So I totally get her comment. But it is a difficult one, because there are various styles of leadership, and there's so much you need to do in a role. And this might come as a surprise to you, Sonita, but I actually find hierarchies aren't really the best way to lead. But that's just my style of leadership, because I believe that in order to make sure that everybody is in tune, in order to make sure that everyone's on the journey together and everyone takes ownership, it's so important that in some ways that it's a lot more flatter. And I think I've been reading a lot lately, pandemic, where a lot of leaders are talking about, the flat structure, that now what the world is looking for, that style of leadership, more conscientiousness, more kindness, more thinking about well-being. Whereas up until now, that kind of thing was too soft, too nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, for sure. For sure. I mean, the idea of the pyramid helped me sort of clarify my thoughts today, but I actually do agree with you in terms of, you know, that certain sense of equality, that we're all in this together. We, you know, in a sense, it's still the leaders, it's still the, you know, the bosses, the trustees. As they rise, they take us with them. So as they, you know, as they learn and understand their own emotional well-being, they then begin to understand the needs of, you know, their staff and volunteers. And with that knowledge, they bring them up, they bring us up. So there is that sort of equality to a certain degree. And I could connect with what you just said there. It does make sense. And it's kind, you're right. It's kind leadership. It's compassionate and empathetic. All those words that do tend to just get thrown around and over the years have just become buzzwords, you know, that don't, perhaps people haven't really sat and thought about the depth of what does it mean to be compassionate? What does it mean to be kind? What does it mean to have empathy? You know, those sorts of things, if you really sit down and think about them and break them down, they're a lot deeper than they look on paper. It's easy for people to say, oh, yes, we have empathy in our workplace. Show me what that looks like. I want to see what empathy looks like in your workplace. I think those words sort of need a relaunch. They need a revival.
I agree.
They need a revival, but they need a revival with their true meaning. And, you know, what's that phrase? The actions speak louder than words. So we can all say, yes, we're compassionate and we have a very kind and empathetic work environment. But let me see that in action. Let me see what that looks like and what that means for you in your organization. So that's kind of where my mind goes. I listen very clearly to what people say. I'm a very active listener, but I also look and I observe. And if you want to go one step deeper, I also feel. So I know when I walk into a meeting, or I know when I walk into a room, I get a sense, I get a feeling of this is a safe place, or this is a warm place, or actually this is quite a hard place. This is a place where I'm going to need to know my P's and Q's, and I'm going to have to keep my needs to myself because I don't think they're going to be encouraged here. You get a sense of it as well. That's just a little bit.
That is we get that sense, but we also interpret based on the behaviors of others. James has just put a comment, teamwork. But you know, teamwork, my favorite word. Teamwork.
Yes.
Put together, it becomes teamwork, one word. But teamwork is a lot about, you know, within an organization, building that culture. It's a bit of what you said, but you know, empathy is get really annoyed when people throw that word around, because I went on training years ago where social services were trying to teach practitioners how to empathize, and I thought, you can't teach people. And it was like nodding at the right time, using the right buzzwords, and it just really irritated me, because you either you feel it or you don't, or if the organization has a culture around it, then it can be encouraged.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big one. And interestingly enough, on the 10th of June this week, it's actually Empathy Day, which I got quite excited about because I'd forgotten all about it. And then I saw it on my Twitter. I was like, yay! And there's a wonderful Twitter page called Empathy Lab UK. And they're pretty much hosting Empathy Day on the 10th of June. So they're going to have quite a lot of online discussions and things like that. So I'm really looking forward to that. But it also made me think, on the 10th of June, I definitely want to mark Empathy Day, and I'll definitely bring it with me into work and be like, okay, guys, what are we doing today for Empathy Day? And the
Some
idea
people might hold you to it.
But I don't want it to just be a day. I want, once I bring that in, I want it to be like, okay, so also how can we carry this on long after the 10th of June? Which I know will be fun in my workplace. I won't come against resistance, which is encouraging.
I'm glad you feel that, Sonita. Just based on what you said, I'm just trying to pull it all together. But you actually dropped something that you didn't go into detail about. So you talked about active listening. So where does that come from? I know you've been trained in and you've done various volunteering stints over the years. Tell us a bit about that.
I've been really privileged and lucky to have had some amazing, wonderful training, heartfelt training over the years from various places. Most of the time it's come from the voluntary sector. So I volunteer with Samaritans. So a big part of, the core part of being a Samaritan is active listening. But also, I volunteered with a bereavement charity. And again, the listening is so important because you have to be present. You have to be there to be able to listen to somebody talk about their grief. You're not there to fix the problem. You're not there to try and make it better for them or to try and cheer them up. You literally are there to sit with them in their grief. And just listen, because generally that's what people need. They just want to be listened to. But yes, active listening. I mean, I do have counselling skills as well. So I've used them over the years as well. And to be fair, they're natural transferable skills. So I use them in my youth work. I've always been passionate about listening to young people. I believe that, we need to listen to young people now more than ever before. That I'm really passionate about that. But equally, I guess, I've done some befriending over the pandemic. So, speaking and listening on the phone to local people who are isolated, suffering with physical and emotional and mental disability or, low well-being. And that's all about listening. You have to hear somebody for us to feel validated. I know I like to feel listened to. I can usually tell if I'm talking to somebody and their eyes just sort of cloud over and, I can see they've zoned out. It makes me feel like I don't want to talk anymore because I'm clearly, taking up your time or you're not feeling anything about what I'm saying. So actually I just won't talk anymore. And I feel horrified at the thought that anyone would feel like that in my presence. I'm the woman that will come and say hello to somebody sitting at the bus stop, just because they're sitting at the bus stop. Who doesn't want to have a little chat when you're waiting for the bus? And so in that moment, I do believe if you're going to initiate a conversation, then why wouldn't you actively listen to the other person's interaction, engagement and response? I kind of feel like, that it's really important. And active listening, again, it's become another buzzword over the years. I originally heard it from counselling training, but I kind of really come to understand the true depth of it when I'm volunteering with Samaritans, because you're on the phone, you can't see that person, you know nothing about them. The whole Samaritan service is completely anonymized. And all you have is this voice on the end of the phone, and you have to listen. You have to be really tuned in. You can't be on the phone. Active listening means I'm not holding the receiver and thinking, oh, I wonder what I'm going to make for dinner tonight, which is normal. We're human beings and the mind does wander. But if you really take active listening seriously, you train yourself, you bring yourself back into that moment. You're in that moment with that person, in their moment, in their reality. So if somebody's talking to me on the phone and telling me I'm in deep distress and I'm not sure if I want to carry on, I have to be listening. I have to be listening to that. And if I'm listening, I will ask the right things. I will say the right things. And that's important. It's important to me that when somebody has my time and attention, that I'm giving them the best of me, and usually that is in some quality active listening, and usually it's empathy as well and compassion. You know, you may not necessarily always agree with what somebody's talking to you about, but it's not your story, it's not your reality, it's not your truth, it's theirs. And in that moment, if you really are actively listening, you're standing in their truth and their reality with them. I do get a bit sort of passionate about it.
No, I can imagine. But Sonita, you know, like what you're saying and what you're sharing is clearly a niche. It's you know, not, that's not your average person does not empathize or is not able to understand or actively listen, like yourself, especially with all that training and personal experience. What would you share about personal experience?
Personal experience, I mean, gosh, I would say probably right from day one, right from birth. My story probably starts right from the beginning of feeling unheard, and probably on some levels unseen. I grew up, I guess, with that old phrase, you know, children should be seen and not heard. Except I think in my household it was children should not be seen or heard. You know, and to voice your needs or to have an opinion or to disagree with something was just absolutely forbidden. So I guess growing up into adolescence, I sort of come to learn that, you know, you don't speak because nobody listens, nobody hears you. In some of my early adult life, I sort of had times where the phrase where you're laughing and smiling on the outside and inside you're silently screaming. That was very much a lot of my experience from childhood, adolescence into early adulthood. And I think it was only later on in my life, and probably through training and work experience and life experience, that I would come to understand that I do have a voice and I do have a right to speak. I just had to learn to be brave enough and have the courage to actually do it. And, you know, I'm in my 40s now, and I'm only just now starting to really appreciate or understand what that actually means. What does it look like, sound like to use your voice? It's not something that came natural to me. And I guess sometimes, you know, that I still get my days where I'm like, I'm not sure. I still sort of have a little inbuilt fear of conflict. And so if I think there's going to be absolute unrest, I will often just keep quiet. But what I'm training myself, what I'm working on myself is it's okay. It's okay for me to say something. If there's suddenly conflict erupting around me, it's not because of me. It's not because of what I said. It's because of how it's been received, interpreted and perceived by the other people around me. And I'm sort of trying to, you know, tap into that and work on that. And ironically, having struggled for so long to find my own voice, it's never stopped me encouraging and motivating and gently pushing others to use their voice. I've always been so passionate about other people using their voice. And it's only at this stage in my life where I've sat there and thought, Sonita, you need to take a dose of your own medicine. It's all fair and well telling everyone else to use their voice, but what about you? What about your voice? I'm just starting to come to a place of peace with that. I'm starting to trying to exercise it more.
No, that's, I love that you said exercise it more, because we only get better and better what we exercise and what we practice. And it's quite interesting. Maybe this is why you are best placed to understand emotional well-being, because you yourself have personal experience, but because of that, you know, the responses of other people, like you said, aren't necessarily because of what you're doing. but because they have their own emotional unmet needs. And and
Yes.
and and I think this is where we get into a bit of complexity here. I
Yeah.
think it's that whole side about, when we say flippantly, you're as good as you think.
Yeah.
And when I say this often, our mind is our biggest barrier. We
Yes.
never know what's going on in an individual's mind from day to
Yeah.
day, whether that individual could be the strongest personality you've ever met. You don't know what's going on because we all wear masks, you know.
Yeah.
But I think the pandemic has certainly, I've noticed, it's taken a lot of people's masks off. Um,
Yes.
but but
Yes.
what has helped you to take off your mask? And I know somebody
Ooh,
said teamwork.
good question. Good question. What's helped me to take off my mask? I guess actually having a lot or feeling supported at work. And I think in my personal life, probably during the pandemic, having friends and close loved ones actually open up about their own masks. I think the pandemic brought something out, and people started to be vulnerable. People started to be a little bit honest and sort of say, actually, this isn't how it really is. And actually, this is what's really happening behind my Instagram filter, or this is what's really going on behind my, celebrationary Facebook status. Actually, I'm feeling like this. And it was quite surprising. Some of the people it came from in my personal life, I was like, ooh, okay, interesting. And I think it kind of made me feel a bit braver about it. And I would say another thing actually was I was quite impacted by the befriending that I was doing on the telephones, and just hearing other people's vulnerability, hearing their distress, hearing, how much struggle was in them. And one of the best ways that I was able to connect with somebody was to actually relate to it and actually be like, yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that. And in my own mind thinking, I need to talk about this more. I need to be more open about it. I live with and have experienced depression my entire life. And I have annual, very deep, dark, depressive episodes in my life more or less every year. And it can be it used to be once or twice a year, but I would say definitely through the pandemic, I would say it was probably one of the longest episodes that just sort of went on and on and on. And in those moments, I still have to function. I still have to be a parent. I still have to be a sister. I still have to be a partner. I still have to be a professional. I still got to go to work. So, what do you do about that? I guess that's when, we start talking about resilience, but it's, I have to go into autopilot and I have to come in and be Sonita, who everyone expects to see, who's happy, bubbly, full of ideas and creativity. But actually inside, I feel broken, or I feel like I'm dying when I'm in those episodes, those very dark, depressive episodes. And then when I come through them, because I always do, goodness knows how, but I always do, I come through them, and it's
You're
like,
a warrior.
it's like I'm reborn again. I come out the other side and I'm like, ooh, I feel like doing some painting today. Oh, I think I'll take up a new hobby. And it's like a rebirth. And I come out and I'm full of energy, and I want to motivate and infuse everyone. So I've started to realize, I would probably say in the last couple of years, that by taking off my mask and allowing, because what you do when you take off your mask is, first of all, you're making yourself vulnerable, but you're also giving others permission. You're allowing others to see you, to really see you. And actually, that's wonderful. It's a gift. You're giving other people a gift. You're saying, look, actually, the mask is off. This is who I really am. Do you still like me? Do you still want me? Will you help me? And it's wonderful if those people are able to respond with yes, like yes, thank you, come here, you know, and then you suddenly opened up, you set that ethos for sharing. Somebody else in the other corner of the room will go, actually, I've been feeling like that for the longest time. So in answer, actually, a large part of the answer to your question, I actually think one of the biggest things that's helped me to take off my mask has been knowing the impact that I'm able to have for others by doing that. It's not even so much me. I mean, it does give me a sense of relief to be able to take the mask off, but at the same time, it's seeing how that impacts other people. There's something really beautiful about seeing other people almost sigh with relief and say, actually, thank God you said that. This is how I've been feeling. There's something really powerful about that.
It's the words, I think the most powerful words I picked up was giving people permission. So when you can be vulnerable and you can be honest about who you are, other people then feel that they can do the same. So this is where I guess, you know, we were talking about the new styles of leadership that people are looking towards, the compassion, the conscientiousness, the kindness, all of that is coming to the forefront, because actually those are the people right now that will be able to get through really, really difficult, challenging times. And so, like, I know we've been talking for about 45 minutes now. And yeah, we
have another 45.
Yeah, but I know, Sonita, you could talk more. But I just wanted to ask like a couple of questions. And I guess, you know, you kind of, I was going to ask that question around how do you give people permission? You went into it. So that's great. But like in terms of, you talked about organizations and the people at the top, senior leaders. What advice would you give them right now in terms of, you know, just thinking about pandemic and how maybe in the community sector, because of what you just shared, your own personal journey, as well as, you know, what's going on at the moment or during the pandemic, what's really important for, I think, senior managers in organizations in our field, the community side, is recognizing that people that, I think you kind of alluded earlier around, so the community or the sector that you work in, people in those sectors tend to have the highest emotional need. So I think you're probably best placed. This is your area, so dive in.
Yes, I guess just on that last bit that you said, it's a wonderful place for me to start in terms of definitely in, for instance, the charity sector, most voluntary sectors, definitely they're all about community sector. It's all about helping others. It's all about trying to give of yourself as an organization or a group, community group, to give of yourselves and individually the best help that you can to other people. And one of the best things I've learned from my time with Samaritans is that it's absolutely impossible to help others if you yourself are running on empty. So it's really important that, you know, you are also, it's important that those execs or, you know, those people in charge, those, you know, the leaders and that, it's important that they are investing in their staff and volunteers, because those people are going to be putting a lot out and they're going to want to do their best. Nobody works in the charity or voluntary sector just for fun or just for the sake of a job. People
or
are
even
there
for money.
Never for money.
Not very well paid, is it?
No, not at all. You will never do it for money. You will be doing it because you want to make a difference. But you can't do that if your own cup is not full. You can't operate on a sort of, you know, empty cup. It's got to have stuff in there. So you have to invest in your staff and your volunteers. And it kind of takes me back to what I said before. as a boss or a leader or senior or somebody, you know, CEO, you've got to invest in yourself as well. You've got to invest in yourself, because it's a chain reaction. If you're not looking after yourself, how can you then support and look after your staff? And then how would they go out and look after their community? So it's like a real sort of chain reaction. Everybody has to have that support. And I think it's really important to recognize that. I think right now, after the pandemic, it's really important that everybody is taking some responsibility. I had another thought about that earlier today as well. And I was thinking, you know, if you talk about money and you talk about services and budgets and fundings, we know that right now there's nothing in the pot unless you're clever enough and qualified enough to know how to find it. But in everyday life, it's all, we're talking about service cuts, which we will see much more of as the years progress, to make up for everything we've been through. And so what do we do about looking after emotional health? The NHS waiting lists are endless. It's not their fault. They don't have the resources. They don't have the funding. They're doing the best they can. But it means there's long waiting lists for people waiting for counselling and therapy, and emotional wellbeing programs and things like that. So why are we, if we talk about sustainability or, you know, responsibility, why can't we actually look after each other as a society, as a community, as a neighbourhood? Why can't we actually try and tap into our own resources, our own self-awareness, our own resilience, our own emotional well-being, skills and strengths? Why can't we tap into them? We did kind of start that during COVID. Suddenly people turned to their neighbour and made sure that she or he was okay, or they had what they needed. We tapped into that. We actually we opened the lid. And what I really don't want us to do is just close that lid again and just be like, oh well, life's going back to normal. I don't need to know, and I don't need to knock on my neighbour's door anymore. You should still knock on that door, because I think maybe not everyone realizes or understands how much that knock on the door meant to that elderly person, or to that disabled person, or to that isolated person. That knock on the door was the first time that ever happened in their life during the pandemic. And we should still feel a sense of responsibility with or without a pandemic. We should still want to look out for each other. And I feel like, as you very kindly say and celebrate, that I have all these skills and I have all this knowledge and lived experience to be able to pass on, or to be able to help others or teach others. I guess part of me sitting here this evening is me realizing my own accountability, my own sense of responsibility. I can give something back. I can help people. I can teach people. I can share my own expertise with others to help them to also be able to share with others. And I was thinking about, it's been a good few years. I can't remember exactly, but there's been a good few years where most local authorities started to remove all the local benches, park benches and just local town squares. There was always seating. I've grown up my whole life in Walthamstow, and there was always seating. And lots of that was taken away. And, I think the idea was to try to help combat antisocial behaviour, or groups loitering or gathering and drinking and things like that. I guess, there was reasons for it. But what I think now is actually one of the most important things for emotional health is to be outdoors. And not everybody's a sportsman or an athlete. Some people if you say to someone, be outdoors, it just means finding a nice bench, sitting down under a tree and just doing a bit of people watching. And I thought, actually, we should have some seating back. And then I thought, well, we'll take it a step further, because let it not just be about somebody sits on a seat as an isolated individual. Let it be a sharing seat. Let it be a seat where, you know specifically, maybe it's got a little plaque on it, you know, and it says, come and sit on this seat, so that when others see you, they'll come and sit down and we can engage. You know, I think we should be looking out for each other in our neighborhoods and in our community. We need to, in a way, all become trained experts. We all need to suddenly understand and be able to recognize in others emotional health and well-being. And we shouldn't feel like, oh, that's not my problem, or, oh no, you know, I'm not going to go and talk to a stranger because, you know, that's just weird. Yes,
Can't do that. We can't do that anymore. It's too late. The pandemic's opened the lid.
Because I'm going to bring it back. We can sit on either end. We can sit on either end of the bench, but I want to bring back human engagement and interaction, because it's so good for our soul. It's so good for our spirit. It's so good for our emotional health. If I spend a whole week in my house, I could be as busy as a bee, doing all my work from home on the laptop. I could be, you know, doing the housework. I could be doing 1,000,001 things. I've never not got something to do at home. But the difference in my emotions from spending a week indoors to actually coming out and speaking with other people, taking a walk down the market, or just sitting on the bench, sipping a juice and just watching people go by, that effect, what that has on my emotions, that and my mood levels, is completely, you know, priceless. I will come home and I will feel fresh. I will feel like, you know, I will feel like I've been a part of society, of life. You know, I will feel like I've been a productive human being, that people still know I exist. You know, I'm one of those people. I'll walk down the street and I will smile at you, because I want you to know I saw you. I want you to know you've been seen, because I know how it feels to be unseen. And I want people to know I see you. You know, I smile. If I'm sitting on the bus, I'll wave at people on the street, because there's just something really magical and almost childlike about it. You know, we're all sort of walking around and we got to get on with stuff. And I understand that. I understand that we're in a really pressured time in our lives at the moment, and everybody just needs to get focused on what they're doing, and they've got no time for distraction. But what they're doing at the same time is they're actually limiting their own experiences. They're keeping themselves, if you like, in a sort of emotional state of just being, what's the word? I want to say stagnant, but I'm not sure if that's the right word. We need to have emotional engagements with people more than we really truly understand. I think that's
emotionless, maybe not stagnant, but maybe just switching the emotions off completely. I don't know. What you said about, you know, you want to say, I hear you, I see you. But something someone told me years ago, you can only make change by being in a position of change. So, you know, you talked about the pyramid.
Yeah.
You can only say you hear people or you see people in a management role or a senior role of leadership, or if you make yourself visible like we have just now. You know, we've got people from all over. I've got connections and wonderful friends on LinkedIn in the US, Canada, other places all the world that will be watching this. And so, you know, I know that a lot of you were a little bit uncomfortable before about like making yourself visible, but you can say what you say and nobody else will have the same story, because you're the expert from your lived experience. So it's really interesting how about sustainability. You know, I'm extremely passionate with my fundraising expertise around why, if during the pandemic when we had nothing, we reached out to each other, we realized everything already within our community, and we actually don't need, because we have what it takes to survive. So why lose that? Isn't that something to hold on to beyond the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And I think there are valuable things that we can take away from the pandemic. You know, it's been a hugely traumatic experience. No matter how you experienced it, every single one of us as human beings will have taken some sense of trauma away from that pandemic, and on all sorts of levels. And they won't always be obvious levels either. They may actually only begin to manifest and show themselves months or a couple of years later down the line. But all of us absorbed that pandemic, and that we equally absorbed the trauma that came with it, the sense of crisis, the sense of anxiety, of not knowing, you know, fear, loss. Everybody took some trauma away with them. And I feel like the aftermath, I refer to it as the aftermath of the pandemic. The pandemic, yes, may be on the way to, you know, mending, and perhaps potentially we're having a new normal coming and all the rest of it. But for me, it's not the end. It's not the end, because there's an aftermath afterwards. And what that, to me, what that looks like is it's people's emotional and mental health and well-being. It's people sort of having to adjust, readjust, relearn. Some people said to me they're having to relearn social skills, how to have a conversation with somebody in public, how to get on transport again after never using it for a year. You know, we're talking about really basic things that are now really big things that emotionally impact people, and they impact your mental health and your emotional well-being and your sense and perception of what the world is now. What is it now? What does it mean to, you know, to be in a let's say post-pandemic world? What does it mean now? You know, and those things, I think we still need to acknowledge that. And that's why I said what I said earlier, and you just sort of reinforced that. You know, if we were able to reach out with such kindness during the pandemic, why can't we do that with just as much, if not more, kindness in the aftermath? Because it's almost like in the aftermath, we need each other just as much, possibly a little bit more even, dare I say it. You know, and it's not just going to be, we're not going to just readily have access to therapy and counselling and, you know, services. And we have to find a way to be able to actually be each other's support system.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily clinical support, is it? It's not always counselling people need. James has a question. No. James has a question, Sonita. He says, Sonita, want to watch and listen to, will others be able to interview like a podcast? Yes, James, we could arrange that. What plans do you have, Sonita? Doing more sharing? ? Look forward to reading and hearing more of your stories.
So I am in the process at the moment of setting up a website, which will be Support and Inspire. There is a link on my LinkedIn. At the moment, it's just the landing page, but actually that landing page is a huge statement for me, to myself. So every time I click on it, I'm like, oh, look, that's mine. So it's like, you know, it's going to be a place where I want to be able to communicate with others. I want others to be able to reach out to me. I want to be able to offer guidance. I want to be able to offer any sort of consultation. I want to be able to share with others what I've been holding in myself my entire life. You know, my lifetime of lessons, learnings, and magic. It's magic today. I refer to it as magic today. In the past, there was many other words that were not so special, but it's magic. I appreciate it, and I'm learning to value it in myself. I'm learning to, you know, just sort of look in the mirror and say, Sonita, you're magical, and go out there and sparkle, go out there and shine, go out there and do what you really have always wanted to do in your heart, and you've always known you wanted to do it, but you just didn't have the courage to take that first step. And it's about courage. My favorite heroine is Brené Brown. I love her because she talks about courage, and she talks about vulnerability, and she talks about your authentic self and your truth, your own truth. And those things are so special to me at this time in my life, more than ever, because I wouldn't have understood them. If you talked about those things to me 10 years ago, I still didn't have that. I still wasn't tuned in. It was all there inside, but I just wasn't able to tune into it. It takes a lot of work to get to a place where you can say, okay, I recognize this in myself. I have something to offer. It's going to be a bit messy. It won't always be pretty, but actually that's what people want. They don't want all picture perfect. They want the truth. They want your truth. They want you as you are. And that's taken a long time for me to sort of fully understand that, because it's equally taken me a long time to want myself as I am. I've had to work on wanting myself as I am before I can then say, oh, the world will accept me as I am. But I'm coming to understand that actually that's possible.
10 years in the making, is it, Sonita?
It's a lifetime. It's a lifetime in the making.
Yes, can't tell you what resilience means to me. Ravinda, who's one of my connections, put a question, and I think this leads to what you said earlier about investment. So Ravinda says, as a voluntary in the charity sector, I just talk the talk. Listening today, I realize I need to learn the listening skill. Is it because of lack of counseling skills? Art is my background. How would you advise me to help young people with mental health? Now, before you go into answering that question, I want to address what you talked about in terms of investment. So, me, in my leadership roles, I've never had anyone above me acknowledge that I need help or I need support. So quite often I've had to ask for investment in my role. And during the pandemic, in fact, twice, once when my organization supported, external support, and personally went and sought a coach via LinkedIn. So I think it's so important to understand, because I'm a big advocate of mentoring and coaching. So I'm currently mentoring two individuals from two different community organizations. But I've also put myself forward for London Youth, because they asked me to. So I'd be mentoring other community organizations in other London, the senior leaders in those organizations. Now, I have chosen to do that because I see the real value, but I think it's really important because for me, in all of my years of recruiting individuals, I've often prioritized passion over degree and qualification. For me, someone who is passionate about and has lots of experience in their area, expertise, is the best person to do that job. So Ravinda has asked that question. Don't know how, if you're happy to address it. Is it because it says art is my background? How would you advise me to help youth with mental health questions?
Okay, so I'm happy to go with it and take the plunge. I actually absolutely love the question. And I think it might be nice afterwards, Manwari, you could also give your take on it as well. But I would straight away say, first of all, I'm going to say straight away, first of all, that I just want to say thank you to Ravinda for actually allowing herself to be honest and vulnerable by admitting that, you know, she's been talking the talk, but possibly not walking the walk. And that's, you know, that's wonderful. It's a nice way of symbolizing what we've talked about today, about, you know, being truthful, standing and being vulnerable, taking the mask off and saying, look, actually, this is what I've been doing, but I would like to change that and I'd like to do it differently. So thank you for that, first of all. And the big question, the big answer to your question, is it because of the lack of counselling skills? Forget it. You don't have to have the counselling skills. You don't need the counselling skills to listen, to be actively listening. Think about a time in your life where, you know, a loved one or someone close to you has been in distress or needed to share something really important with you. You would have been listening. That in that moment, you would have been listening. It is something that we can all do. It is something that, you know, doesn't really need, the training is a bonus, but you don't need that training. It's something that is there. It's human. It's in us. But it's whether you choose to, like you just have, Ravinda, by saying this, I want to tap into that. I want to know how to be an active listener, to really listen. You've already done the first bit. The first session's already closed. You've done it. First day of the course, you've passed. So it's like, you know, yeah, you don't need to have the counselling skills. You just have to want to listen to somebody. You have to be able, I guess, one thing that you could potentially use that would help you if you're somebody with quite a busy mind, is perhaps, if you don't already, is use meditation. Meditation practices are wonderful for quietening the mind and actually bringing us to a place of focus, which are wonderful skills to have when you're listening, actively listening to others. It's something I have gotten into myself in past years, and it's really helped me to quieten the chatter in my head. And then you talked about my love. I'm so happy you talked about art. So art is your background. And I feel like I want to link the two straight away. You said art is my background. How would you advise me to help youth with mental health? You just gave yourself the answer right there. Art is fantastic. Creativity. The best times that I've sat with a young person or a group of children and young people, and I've wanted to really bond and connect with them, is by using art and creativity. It's a fantastic way of getting young people to express their emotions, their feelings, their thoughts, because often they don't have the vocabulary for it. Often they haven't felt safe enough to express it. And suddenly you will be that safe adult for them. You will bond and you will make that connection with them using your art. So how would I advise you to help? I would say definitely use your art. I would say, be yourself, because children and young people can see through fake. They know when an adult is trying too hard. They know when an adult is just, speaking the speak, talking the talk. They are very perceptive. So be yourself, be vulnerable, allow yourself to say, you know, I really want to kind of understand more about what you guys are feeling. Would you help me? And you can literally break it down like that. There's amazing ways of being able to connect with young people just by allowing yourself to, as we talked about earlier, take the mask off. But when you throw in some art and creativity, you're onto a winner. I'm excited for you.
No, you've covered more or less what I would have said. There's your icebreaker, art.
Yeah.
Giving my own example, Ravinda, I knew how to play badminton, table tennis or pool. And whilst I was a youth worker, I actually learned so that I could break ice with young people. Mental health is not an easy area to approach with young people, because quite often they haven't understood it yet as a problem. Or if they have, they will stay very quiet about it. It's all about building trust and relationship. And I don't think it's any different to how we build a relationship with an adult. It's exactly the same. I would question, Ravinda, what's going on in your mind, your psychology. What makes you think that it would be hard for you to advise a young person? If you were treating a young person like you would anybody else and you were doing an activity, you start to gradually build your relationship, trust builds, then before you know it, you are supporting their mental health in all those conversations where you're listening.
Yeah. You've got it. You've already got it. You've got it inside you, Ravinda. You've just got to quieten all the chatter, sit down and really listen to yourself. In fact, that's the best advice I can give you. If you want to learn how to listen to other people, listen to yourself, because we are all guilty of not listening to our own inner voice, our own heart voice, our own soul voice. We don't listen. We doubt ourselves. It's human nature. We always
Sunita, I have to say this. When you say that, you don't mean the inner critique, do you?
No, I'm talking about listen to what your heart really knows, because the inner critic is only up here. The inner critic is up here, but your true voice is here. It's in your heart. Your real truth is in your heart. That voice is different. It's quieter and softer and often goes unheard, because this one up here is full of it, got all the gift of the gab and the gob. But actually your real voice is there in your heart. And if you're able to quieten this, whether it's using meditation, whatever it is, that maybe it's painting, using your art, when all the noise quietens down here, you'll hear a little whisper down here. And that little whisper is your heart voice. That's your truth. That's your truth. That's just, this is rubbish. But this here is your truth. So you listen to yourself first, and then you're going to have no problem listening to anybody else. That's the conclusion I've come to. Literally today, in this moment, in this chair, Ravinda's actually helped me to come to that conclusion.
I always say the best moments are the moments that are most unexpected. I've just got a really nice comment from somebody that I have to mention. Nazira says, Sonita has the kind of magic I love and believe in and want to see more. So I'm not putting too much pressure on you, Sonita, but I understand that you'll be putting together programs and workshops, hopefully, and in the months to come, people can reach you via. Do you want to?
You can reach me right here on LinkedIn completely. I've also got an email address on my LinkedIn, so you can reach me there too. I'm happy to receive direct email. And I hope that I've been able to install a little link to my landing page on my website. But I think that's a work in progress in itself, so it'll take a little bit longer. But I welcome all communication here on LinkedIn and or my direct email, which is a Yahoo address. And I guess we'll see what happens. I took the plunge. I was brave.
No, it's wonderful. It's wonderful to the plunge, but also it's wonderful for everybody else that's listening and watching now. I'm going to try and round off so we can, talk. But it's been really insightful, Sonita. It's been wonderful, and I think you've just given us so much valuable insight into emotional well-being, of it beyond the pandemic. Like you say, it's going to be more important than ever before. And I can't begin to emphasize investment. I'm a big advocate of coaching and mentoring. I'll do that in all my, but I have lots of connections on LinkedIn, and Sonita is really an advocate. Anybody required a coach or a mentor, send her a direct message. She is really the best I know in terms of expertise in emotional well-being. So thank you, Sonita. And so we're going to say goodbye for now. I'll be back in 2 weeks' time. Do you want to say anything else, Sonita? Message?
Yes, I want to say a big thank you, Manwara, for having me and giving me my first little step into the limelight. And I guess I want to thank myself for being brave and having the courage to accept your invite. And I just want to say to everybody, be gentle with yourself and be gentle with each other, because there's something really underrated about gentleness. It doesn't get enough mention, it doesn't get enough credit, being gentle with ourselves and being gentle with each other is so important, and it's that first stepping stone to so much else. When it comes to emotional health, I'm gentle. I'm very gentle these days, primarily with myself and with others.
Well, I have to say it's been a learning curve for me throughout my life. Always thinking that I know I'm self-aware enough, and then realizing, no, actually I'm not, because I'm something. but that's, I think it's remind myself and being more and more aware. But yeah, it's been a wonderful discussion today. Thank you for being vulnerable. I know
Thank
you
you
have
for allowing me.
I know you have a long story, but for you to write about that one day, and maybe there'll be other mechanisms. And I'm excited for you. Have a wonderful evening, Sonita, and thank you to everybody else. Enjoy your Sunday. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us.